And how are we doing today? All right, you can see got a bit of a different setup going on today here. We're working some stuff out because what we're going to show you today is we're going to get Proxmox loaded on this system. When I say this is an old system, the processors in here came out all the way in 2009, so it is an older system. But that's one of the things I wanted to show is, hey, those old some people can't afford a Pies. They might have an old system sitting around. Getting Klipper up on something that's quite old is something that's quite doable. Now, this particular computer is a actual server, so we're running actually two different processors in this. They're each 4 cores, 4 threads. So it doesn't always like to boot in the standard way. So I'm getting our media rewritten because right before the stream started, we tried doing some booting and it was not booting up to any USB drive. So we're gonna sit here and give that's got about 4 minutes going. But over here in chat, I see a few people in here. We've got Mad Dog, we've got Shrimp Father, Pat, Raj. I see a new name, NC7807. Yeah, welcome on in. If you are a Linux fan and everything, Proxmox and Linux, that's probably why it showed up here, because that's what we're going to be doing, is going to get Proxmox going up on here, starting up a VM with Ubuntu server on it, and getting Klipper installed on that.
I was just thinking, I do also have this USB add-in card if we end up needing it. This might be helpful.
Having extra USB ports would always be helpful.
Also got USB-C on it in case we need that on this computer for something.
Yep. But nowadays, like if you go on Facebook Marketplace and all that, there are older actual servers and stuff like that, and old desktops and everything that you can buy for fairly inexpensive nowadays. I know when I was looking the other day, I seen a Dell server with 144 gigs of memory in it, and it was like $100.
And to be fair, as long as you're not looking at a server that has DDR4 or DDR5 in it right now, they're not that expensive. Obviously we are in the RAM-apocalypse right now, where those machines, or just, DDR4 and DDR5 RAM especially right now, are freaking expensive. But, if you're looking about DDR3 range, it's not having as much of an issue right now.
Yep, so just waiting on the image to write to this disk, and we're going to see if it's going to decide to read our disk. What I can do in the meantime, I just saw it, is we can go through some BIOS settings that you might want to check, especially on an older computer, to see if a virtualization environment would be something that could be done. So we'll try this way first. All right, so let me boot this up, and this is nowhere near my loudest computer, but these servers can get pretty loud because a lot of times what they do is they kind of use brute force. So they'll pull in air from up here and they will literally just force it through the entire system. But they usually have some pretty powerful fans going on in these things, because they've got to get through things like hard drives, cards, all of that. So we do have access that we can see, BIOS and all that as we're going. So, I believe, our system time is definitely off. It is not 23:15. It is currently, let's see here, 19:05. And we'll go 00, okay. 426, that is correct. So then in here in the advanced features on this one, if we go to processor and clock settings, I believe on this one, might not, nope, not on processor and clock on this one. Yes, advanced chip. So in this case, these are Intel processors. So the Intel VTD is the virtualization support. You do want to make sure that is enabled. Otherwise, it doesn't allow you to split up the cores and make them act like separate systems. And so that is something to do. So NC, this is actually a very old system. A lot of the smaller server racks, like you said, will actually have ducting to control that air to make sure that it's flowing over those sensitive heat spots. This one you can see does have a bit of ducting down here. I don't know if we have an overhead this week. We have a bit of ducting right here to kind of flow over the back of the cards, but then there's kind of a free open fan up here, so that hits both of these, so that's why this doesn't really need ducting. It actually has all the drives contained in its own little module back here with its own fan. So this one's set up a bit differently than a lot of those. And it looks like our drive finished writing. So now something you also see in servers that you won't typically see in like your home computer is, let me see if I can, let me slide this over some. This computer actually has internal USB ports on it because a lot of servers will sit here and, you know, they want to use as many of their hard drive spaces as they can for storage. And so they'll actually run off of like a USB stick or an SD card for their operating system. That way they can get as much storage out of the system as possible. In this case, we are just going to try plugging into the front panel because that's where I got this working earlier. But we have that. Let me... Down Under, how you doing? Our boot device priority? No. All right, I'm gonna have to reboot to get it to detect that USB drive. Let's go. Discard changes and exit. And then we're just gonna reboot it during the BIOS boot. Yeah. I didn't hear. So, for those just coming in, what we are doing is we're working on getting this computer up and going, and then we're going to be installing a hypervisor called Proxmox that is going to allow us to run multiple kind of virtual computers within this one system, and we're going to get Klipper installed on all of those, so that way we can sit here and have multiple 3D printers running off of one machine. There's advantages and disadvantages of this. Typically, you know, when you're doing this, a machine like this will take a lot more power than your Raspberry Pi. But unlike the ways where you're running off of a laptop, and if the entire operating system goes bad, you've just lost all of your machines. If you run each machine off of its own virtual machine, one virtual machine can go bad. You might have lost that one machine until you get it up and running, but the rest of the machine can keep going. So now my USB drive is showing up in here. So we're going to save changes and exit. And we're going to see if it'll actually boot to this thumb drive now that we've got it reformatted. I just realized something. I don't think I brought my Mountain Dew over. I did not. I left it in front of the camera. Let's do a voltage today. There we go. So with this, we're actually just going to do the graphical install, just because I'm going to make life easier on myself. And so for this, Proxmox it's free to use for personal use. They do have business licenses and things of that nature that you can do. But for like a personal use, it's perfectly fine. They have two different upgrade paths. They have the, non-licensed, non-enterprise support version and the enterprise support version, which there are some. We're going to be running a script here that I'm going to have to look up because it's been a while since I've used it to remove the little pop-up that comes up, because when you're running the free version, they will let you know that you're running the free version because it's, hey, you have the free repositories enabled. There is no subscription allowed on this one.
To be fair, though, you don't really need to run the graphical version of the Proxmox on the computer unless you plan on going into it very often, because you get the exact same experience by remoting into it from a different computer.
Yep, because
and just putting in the IP address of the machine. It's the exact same thing, just on a different screen. So
yep,
you choose what's best for you.
But it is Linux based, so being a fan of Linux myself, I like a Linux hypervisor. Now we're going to see if this is going to be the big thing, because if we don't get a screen on this one, it may actually be to the point where this computer has finally just bit the dust on me. All right. So NC, the host is actually, once it's installed, is actually command line only. But they have a web interface just like Klipper, with Moonraker, where you get a graphical interface that goes over the web interface. So let me refresh here just to make sure, just to see if we're just having a screen rendering issue.
If this doesn't work, maybe we can try it without the GUI and see if that'll work.
Let's see here. You can have multiple screens of the same VM on a remote system. Yep. So I think this system may just be at that point where...
Try it without the GUI. See if that'll work.
Yeah, let's reboot the system and hope to God that it doesn't mess up the thumb drive, because then I'll have to reboot it again. Yeah. So NC, you can do like a multi-display thing, because you can actually run a virtual like Windows or a virtual Linux box within Proxmox, and then have virtual screens on it. So you could do multiple displays, but you can also sit here and have that virtual machine up on multiple computers at the same time. Okay, good news. It's still seeing that thumb drive. So let's see here. It has been ages since I've had to use the terminal to install Proxmox.
I've never actually installed the GUI on the box itself. I've always done it via the
Oh,
terminal.
it doesn't do a GUI. It's just the install is done with a GUI, and then it goes
I know,
terminal.
that's what I'm saying, is I've never used the GUI in the install for Proxmox.
All right. Now, when I say this is a very old system, like I said, these processors in here are before Intel introduced hyper-threading. So they are 4 cores, 4 threads each. And I've got 12 1 gig sticks of DDR3 in this computer. So Gergman, I sit here and I've installed way too many Linux instances and Windows instances to count. Okay, agree. Yep, we're going to install it to the 250 gig Samsung SSD. America. I need the New York time zone because we are East Coast. US English. Next. Okay. Root password.
Would a GPU add any value for the processing? Well, it depends on what you're doing. For what we're doing here, no, a GPU doesn't help in any way, shape, or form. But if you plan on running stuff like, I don't know, a Plex or a Jellyfin server off of it, you know, to host your own media, GPU can help a lot with encoding that type of stuff. It's not a whole lot that GPUs can actually be used for. Like I said, it's really just encoding video or for AI, large language models or stuff like that, as far as inside of a server.
And then we are /16. And our host name. Host name, you can make whatever you want. I'm just going to call this proxmox.com, but the host name is just the name of the device. If you want to name it, you know, I like fuzzy slippers, you can name it I like fuzzy slippers. Nope. Okay, so let's see here. Why would you want Klipper in a VM? So, other than to run several instances for multiple printers. So, 3D Pole Productions, that's exactly why I'm going to be running Klipper in a VM, because I can run a separate instance for each Klipper install. The advantage of that is if one virtual machine goes down, I'm not losing all of my printers. Like if you were to use an old laptop that you couldn't do virtualization on, and you just installed multiple versions of Klipper, because you can do that with Klipper on one machine, and that machine the entire machine went down, you know, you've lost all those instances. Whereas this one, if a single VM goes down, you know, only one printer is going down until I restore it from a backup or something. That's the other advantage of a VM. is I can do what are called snapshots, where it kind of takes an image of how the system is. And if something were to happen, instead of having to sit here and go through all the setup again, I can just sit here and say, hey, restore this back up from the snapshot, and I'm up and going in almost no time. As far as scheduling issues, the big thing with virtual machines and scheduling, you always want to leave at least one core for the host. So in this case, I have 8 cores and 8 threads total on this. So I want to leave at least one core for Proxmox to use, but that gives me 7 other cores that I can sit here and spread out, and then I really won't get too many. As long as you don't exceed the amount of cores you have, you don't really run into those scheduling issues. You can sit here, I can run, more than, I could run 16 virtual machines on this thing, but that would be a case where I could run into scheduling issues because, hey, this Klipper instance or these 2 Klipper instances want to do the same thing. They both hit the same core, and then we run into scheduling instances, and that can sit here and cause issues with your prints because, hey, if Klipper 1 and Klipper 2 are both printing and Klipper 1 has active, but Klipper 2 needs to do something, well, now all of a sudden the command wasn't sent to your printer, and that can cause an issue. But the other cool thing about like Proxmox and everything, when you create a virtual machine, you can actually sit here and tell it, hey, I'm giving you one core, and then I can sit here and say, hey, you are specifically getting this core. So I can make sure that none of the other virtual machines talk on that core, so I don't have to worry about that scheduling. So in C, I did think about the possibility of running it in a Linux container on Proxmox. The big thing is Linux containers are great for running that single instances. They share it then shares the resources with the host operating system. So in this case, Proxmox is Linux based, so it shares those resources. But because, there's different things that we could want to add on, like Crow's Nest or Input Shaper or stuff like that, that's not contained within Klipper, but they're separate programs. Linux containers are really meant for like a program to run on, not as a replacement for a whole machine. That's why I'm doing the whole virtual machine, because while a Linux container, if you have something small, like for instance, Bitwarden, actually that one you can actually run inside of a Docker container on this and not take up as much resources. But like Bitwarden, which is a password manager, you could run in a Docker container on here, so it doesn't take up as much space as a virtual machine, but you're kind of limited to what that Docker container can do.
On my machine at home where I run Proxmox, I run it on my game server, and similar ideas, right? Where you want to have multiple programs running on the same VM. So the only thing that I actually have running as an LXC on that server is Tailscale, so for remote management, and that's it. LXCs are cool, but again, it's only if you want to use a single piece of software and not have it interact with other pieces of software.
Yep, so like, for instance, running Python, which is what Klipper is based off of, you could do that on an LXC and get Klipper to run that way. But then the other add-ons it wouldn't run. So yes, OX D3AB ADB 33F TAC win. Like the name, looks like an error code. That is the thing is, I'm going to set it up so that, I could theoretically on this one, I could run up to 7 printers off of this, each with their own core. Now I can say, with that, I would have enough memory because Klipper doesn't take that much memory. You look at a Raspberry Pi, you know, you can run a lot of stuff. You can run off of 1 gig, but if I was really getting into this, I'd probably want to run like 7 on this. Give me a second here real quick. I got to remove the USB drive so it'll actually boot into our operating system. But if I wanted to run actually 7 printers off of this one, I would sit here and, you know, probably want more RAM in here instead of the 12 gigs that I have. NC, no, I'm not. Believe it or not, I am one of the weird IT people. I am actually not a fan of Docker.
Yeah, and you're wrong for it, and you know it.
If I'm going to run a containerized environment, I am a Podman person, just because of the fact that I actually like the concept of the ability of, you know, hey, I can let this container run, but it doesn't have to run with root privileges, which a lot of people don't realize. Whenever you run a Docker container, it has full root access. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Linux, and I know a lot of us do, like the Raspberry Pi, so you're probably familiar with the login and everything, but root is God. If you have root access on a Linux machine, the machine will not stop you from doing something. There was that game that went around on Steam a while ago that was wreaking havoc on Linux and Steam Decks because it would run as root rm-tac-rf, which that would look like rm space tac rf slash. So what that's saying is remove recursively, so from this file, all directories below it, and force this through. Don't ask yes, don't stop, don't pass go, just go straight to it. Remove everything from the root directory. So it was pretty much saying, hey, wipe this computer out. You run as root, that will happen, no questions asked, because Linux assumes that if you are in root, you know what you are doing. Okay, so theoretically, now I don't have a user set up, so I'm going to have to run root as root for a bit. Let's go 10.2.0.2:8006, because 8006 is the port that Proxmox uses. And I'm going to tell it, hey, let me proceed. Okay, so our username is for now root, and our password it helps if I can type,
Which we all know you can't do.
Okay, so this was that little pop-up that I was telling you guys about. You know, you do not have a valid subscription for this server. Please visit this to get a list of available options. Now, if you sit here and, you know, turn off the repositories, which are the sources for updates for Proxmox for all subscriptions and everything, it will still pop this up whenever you're in the GUI. But let me take a look at chat here real quick. Gergman, not OpenShift, but Podman. Red Hat's implementation of Docker that allows you to sit here and you could actually run a Docker container on Podman, but then tell it, hey, this is the user that you're allowed to run as. let's see here. So Hacker 97, no, it runs root in the container, but the overall Docker instance itself, so it can access systems, does have root access. Yeah, RMTech RF Flash is a nightmare for anybody that does that. Bergman, I did not know you worked for Red Hat. Well, my hat's off to Red Hat and Fedora. I hate what they did to CentOS. But now give me a second here. I'm going to pull up my little thing here so I can look up the other thing I need. Because I have a script that somebody's written that'll sit here and take care of this little subscription. Okay, so I'm just looking this up here real quick. Let me see. Where did that thing go?
You know what, Town Hunter Maker? I agree. We need a Temple OS VM.
Why would you put that juju on me?
Down Under's idea, not mine. I just stole it.
Okay. Give me a second here while I look this thing up. Because believe it or not, the way that I actually originally found this little script was through actually setting up a Home Assistant VM.
Welcome in, Mad Owl. How you doing?
Yep. So it is actually from a GitHub, and you guys will be able to see that here in a second. I need to get to my shell. Shell. Can you guys read what's on the screen, or shall I make it a bit bigger? Yes, Matt Owl, CentOS was assassinated by IBM when they purchased Red Hat. But can you guys see the shell that's on the screen? All right, a little bit bigger. Howie, can you see it now? Captain Kern, how you doing? All right, so we're just downloading straight from GitHub this post PVE install script and running it.
Give me 1 second here. Let me move the face cam real quick. Switch over here so I can do that.
But NC, I sat here and dealt with it for the longest time, and when I found this little script, it's like I don't have unless you do like a major version update, like when I went from version 8 to version 9 through the update process,
There we go.
that sat here and the script started happening again, so I have to run it again. But once you get used to that thing not popping up, it's amazing. Current, you're having Current, you're having a printer revolt. That's not good. So far, that one's doing pretty well on me. I'm printing parts hopefully soon for the next project for that one. And I still got to order parts for it. Mad Owl is completely correct. If you're don't just never trust but verify. So if you've never run a script before, go through and read it. And if you don't know how to read it, get a friend that does, that can sit here and kind of tell you, hey, this is not going to do anything malicious. I've personally gone through and read this script, so that's why I'm trusting it. But like if you even like, for instance, Kia, when you run that as a script, there have been a lot of people in the community that have gone through and trusted and vetted that. But if you just go onto some forum and they're like, yeah, run this script, it'll fix all of your issues. Either vet it yourself or look for other trusted members in the community that have vetted it. Because the last thing you want is, hey, you ran this script and now all of a sudden there is a nice easy backdoor into your network, and that is never a fun thing, especially when you get into some of these scripts. They can sit here and actually load rootkits and stuff like that if you're not careful. And if you get a rootkit on a system, they can be removed, but sometimes not very easily. But let's go ahead and run this little post script. So yes, we're going to start the post install script. Okay. Format required. Okay. Let's see here. Yep. So what I'm going to tell it is the PV. So it's saying here, the PVE Enterprise repository already exists. Do I want to disable the repo? Yes, I do. The Ceph Enterprise, I want to disable that as well. Do we want to add the PVE node subscription? Yes. Let's see here. Ranch Kid, watching you on Linux reminds me of watching Ken Thompson working on Unix in the old days. It's a fun thing to do. I mean, especially those of us that like to tinker with 3D printers and everything. I can say, to me, Linux is the computer equivalent of, tinkering with a 3D printer. Projects. I don't even know where to go there. So we are going to add the Proxmox virtual environment no subscription repository. And no, we're not going to add the disabled test. And then right here, disable the subscription nag. Yes, please. All right. I do not now high availability. For those of you that aren't in the server world or all of that, high availability is a term used in the server world where you can have multiple computers acting kind of together. So you know, websites use this a lot, like, you know, for instance, Amazon. You know, if Amazon was running off of a single server, imagine waiting 3 days to try and get an Amazon order in, because that's how much the server would be hammered with all their traffic. So what they can do is they can actually have it spread out over multiple computers and make it so that, hey, this server's overloaded, send the traffic to here. It's going to get them to the same web page, but that's a separate computer that can handle that. It can also sit here and do things like failover and stuff like that for, hey, this server went down, automatically failover to this. In this case, since I have a single computer, there is no need to turn on high availability. So we're going to tell it, yes, disable high availability. So I don't need Coroscope for Proxmox VE cluster because I'm not clustering. I will admit I have not looked into Corosync, so I'm not even sure what that is. So, but I do know what a cluster is, and that is you can take multiple Proxmox machines, again, similar to high availability, but you could have them act as one machine instead of failover and pass off machines. Honestly, clustering is what they do to make supercomputers. So, and then we're going to tell it just to, hey, go ahead and do all your updates. NC, yeah, I'm right there with you. I can count on one hand the amount of Windows computers in this house right now, and that is 2.5. I have my partner's desktop that's running Windows. I have our stream computer that's running Windows, just because of Elgato. That it literally, if Elgato would make Linux software, this stream computer would not be running Windows. But Elgato does make some nice software, and we've got lights and mics and stream decks, and so while there are stream deck alternatives in Linux, getting to work with the lights and all of that, Windows just makes a simpler setup for that. And then the half computer is my partner's laptop, whose charging circuit just went bad. And unfortunately on this computer, the charging circuit is built into the motherboard. So in order to fix that charging circuit, you know, honestly, the easy step is to replace the motherboard. So I've just got to buy a whole new computer there. Yep. So Gergman, if it wasn't for the stream, if it wasn't as the main stream computer, we would definitely be running Windows in a VM on that computer just to get the Elgato and all that working. But in this case, for those that stream, they know, or you'll know that, hey, anything that you can take out to make streaming a bit less of a headache is something you want to do. So we're just waiting on these added updates to come in. Kenneth Davis, welcome on in. It's not like the way Windows apps on Linux with an app image. Yeah, I mean, it's even to the point where, like, there was an interview lately where Microsoft actually finally admitted that they messed up with Windows 11. That's where you're actually seeing them roll back a lot of the Copilot stuff and everything. Because, like, I can say, I'm not even getting into the rest of the problems with Windows. Just Copilot alone, they tried to shove into everything. Like, my biggest thing is, why in the heck did Notepad need to have Copilot in it? The basic text editor. Why did that need Copilot? Havoc, welcome on in. Yep, we are doing some. Well, we're starting with getting a hypervisor, which is Linux based, installed. Okay, if you have multiple prox, and this is saying, hey, if you're running a cluster, each in a cluster, they call each computer a node. You have to run this script on each one. And then once we're done here, just like we just did a pretty big update, so it is time to reboot Proxmox. So,
to be fair, there's actually games that run better on Linux than they do on Windows.
oh god, yeah. The overhead that Windows adds is a nightmare.
That's not even ones that are necessarily, made for Linux. Like there's games that have to use Proton
Heck,
from Steam that run better on Linux than they do on Windows.
I was actually made Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
If you've got a nice system, Cyberpunk will run better on Linux than it will on Windows.
Or Minecraft, especially now that they're changing over to Vulkan from OpenGL.
In C, yeah, the Notepad is kind of their equivalent of a CLI text editor. I have not tried to see if you can run Nano or VI or Vim on Windows, because I know like a lot of those Linux subsystems are coming to the Windows terminal. Like when I had for work, they make me use a Windows computer, but I have to go into machines at times, and being able to SSH from the Linux or from the Windows terminal instead of having to go through PuTTY or something just made things a lot simpler. But right now, let's switch back over to the KVM screen because we're going to refresh this because it should be rebooting. It looks like if that rebooted that fast, that is amazing. Let's refresh. That apparently rebooted that fast. I've never seen this machine reboot that fast. Let's see. Yeah, Windows does not have its own native CLI. Sorry about this. The print just finished back there and it's cooling down, and I'm just slowly hearing the popping as it's detaching from the bed plate while it's cooling. Okay. So now, the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to install, we're going to need to make a VM. And in this case, I'm going to be running Ubuntu server just because while Debian works great, especially when you're running with systems this old, Debian is perfectly fine. It also tends to have a slower release cycle. And so, for instance, I'll use PHP. When you're building like a LAMP stack, so Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, Debian might be on PHP 12, whereas the latest version might be like, 14 or 15. You'll get that on Ubuntu, but you might not get that on Debian. So they are typically a bit further behind, but they do that because they sit here and determine this is stable, this works, it's still supported, and so that's what they're going for. So down under the encryption keys for SSH is something I'm used to. So it hasn't bothered me because that's the way Linux does it as well, is it manages the keys in a file and stuff like that. But like NC says, you know, just being able to do SSH your name at IP or at DNS record, to me that makes it so much simpler. So what I'm going to do here is I happen to have an Ubuntu that I already started downloading, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the link to the download. We're going to come in here to Proxmox and we're going to go to this ISO images. And there are two ways you can do it. Like if you have it on a machine, you can just upload the image directly to Proxmox. Cool, you've already downloaded it. The other way you can do it is you can actually go download from URL. And in this case, you know, there's our URL. But I can also go into advanced. And if you notice here on Ubuntu, we have a verify your download image. So it sits here and tells me that our verification is SHA-256. So I can actually go here and say, hey, SHA-256. And then echo in Linux just means, hey, print this to the screen. But if we copy everything within these quotes, or the number at least, and put that into our checksum, what that'll do is it can download it and then verify that, hey, you downloaded the correct image. You know, this image has not been tampered with. But in this case, since I already have it downloaded, we're going to see if it'll let me do this. There we go. In downloads, there's our Ubuntu server. Select. And you can do the hash algorithm there as well if you want. So we're going to upload it. Kirkman, thanks. Believe it or not, teaching is something that has run in my family for quite a while now. Grandfather did teaching. My mom was a teacher. My aunt and uncle actually were university professors, and I have to do teaching in my job as it is right now. So, you know, hearing that, you know, my education system way is coming through to someone really does mean a lot. But NC, yeah, that Debian is extremely stable. That's what they focus on. They don't focus on cutting edge. They focus on this has to work. You know, it may not be the latest and greatest. You know, that new graphics card you bought may not work on Debian. But when Debian works, it works. Okay, so now our Linux image is installed. You can do the same thing with Windows images, or I guess down under Maker's favorite operating system, Temple OS. You can put an ISO in there to use as your.
I think I'm a bigger fan of Hannah Montana OS myself.
Oh, Hannah Montana Linux, yeah. But now the other cool thing is with Proxmox. Yeah, down under, I completely agree with you. Teaching is fun and frustrating at the same time, because some people, they just get it. Other people, it's like you explain it the way you've done to everyone else, but that doesn't make sense. And so then right there on the fly, you're having to rethink and explain, because something that was told to me a long time ago is, if you cannot explain something to a 5-year-old, then you truly do not understand it yourself. In C, believe it or not, the checksum is something that I've learned to go through just because I worked at a location that I'm not going to say, but I will say that there's an employee that does not work there anymore because they did not check a checksum, and it turns out that they did not download the proper software. So, yeah. Oh, Gerdman, that is bad. That is bad. But so, anyways, back to the Proxmox thing. One of the things I like is, you know, whenever you, for a lot of things, a GUI makes things so much simpler. A VM can be made completely on the command line. You actually have quite a bit of control when you do it through the command line. But sometimes those strings can get to be like, you know, you're writing out one command and you're sitting here for an hour typing out that command because you need to enable this option, but disable this option, but set this parameter. Well, one of the cool things about Proxmox is since we have the web interface, creating a VM is literally just a button up at the top. We can literally hit create VM. Our node is Proxmox because that is our only node. The VM ID can honestly be whatever you want. They usually start at 100, and if you just keep creating them without changing that, it'll increment. So
it can be whatever you want as long as you don't have two of the same number.
Correct. But like if I were to make this VM and just click through it and just do a basic one, it would be VM 100. If I were to click create another VM, it would automatically increment it to the next one and call it and make the ID 101. Now the advantage of that is, you know, let's say you had multiple VMs doing multiple things. Like let's say this wasn't just for printers. Well, what I could do is I could sit here and say, you know, I could come up with my own grouping system. So like VM1, anything that is in the 100 to 199 range, I know that that's going to be a VM for a printer. You know, 200 to 299, I know that that's going to be something related to, you know, media servers like, you know, Jellyfin or Plex or audiobook shelf or something like that. I could sit here and have, you know, and then set 300 to 399, you know, this is related to home automation. So, you know, I could have like Home Assistant or, you know, or I could sit here, hey, this was my locally run AI that ran my voice assistants. That way I didn't have to rely on Google. And you could just separate them out that way. And I can tell you, when you have 4 or 5 virtual machines running on a system, the number doesn't matter. When you get into like businesses and all that, where they will have like hundreds upon hundreds of virtual machines running, or, you know, you're into a data center or something like that, where there will be hundreds of these things running, having that grouping system, that organization system, is a lifesaver. So in this case, I'm going to leave this at 100, and in this case, we're going to put this as Voron Ubuntu, because since the 2.4 back there is orange and black, those are Ubuntu's colors. So that Voron is named Ubuntu. Now the resource pool, we don't have any other resource pools besides the one that's on here.
Just got to keep in mind, you can't have a space in the name.
Yep, so in this case, you can see when I go on here, it actually tells me this is not a valid host name. So when I want this, I could actually, if I wanted a space, I would do an underscore. You can, well, yeah, you can do underscore, you can do tack, whichever one. Is it? They finally disallowed underscores? Yeah. Yep, so we're just going to go. Actually, we're just going to leave it as one word. Okay, now I can also tell this, hey, if I have to reboot this entire machine, I can right from here tell this, hey, whenever this machine starts up, start up this virtual machine. Now, again, when you're running like 4 or 5 of these, the amount of time you wait for a machine to start up doesn't really matter. If you start 5 of these at the same time, you're not really going to see a difference. When you're starting up hundreds, that's where this startup shutdown order comes in handy, because you might sit here and have it where, like, you know, you're running a virtual machine for a locally hosted domain name server. Well, you know, if that's making it so that you can communicate with all your others, that's going to probably be one of the first things you need to boot up. So you can sit here and tell that to boot up, and until that's booted up, don't start up any others. You can also sit here and, you know, hey, I don't have anything major like that. I'm going to go to an extreme example. I had 200 printers running off of one computer. But, you know, I could just tell them all to boot up at the same time. But then, you know, you're kind of hammering the system. So you could sit here and say, hey, start up these first 10 immediately, then wait like, you know, 10 seconds, start up the next 10, wait 10 seconds. It can take a bit longer for it to start up, but especially if you're running mechanical hard drives, you're not hammering those hard drives with data requests, because mechanical hard drives are still the king of mass storage. Solid state drives are getting there. You know, I think I saw recently there was a 14 terabyte solid state drive that's come out now, and I think they're working on like 100 terabytes now. But, you know, especially if you're running like an older, with that older medium of the mechanical hard drives, staggering your boot ups can help. Now, it also has a nice little function where you can have tags. So again, while you can separate your VMs by IDs and organize them that way, you can also sit here and say, and add tags. Like, I could add a tag here and say 3D printer. You know, that way, even if I had like 100 printers on this thing, and, you know, but technically, you know, there weren't 3D printers, are all 3D printers, you know, I just did the additive subtractive manufacturing, the hundreds. Well, I could add a tag to 3D printer, and then no matter what number they were, I could sit here and say, hey, show me the tag printer, and it would just show me those machines with that tag. But we'll go next. So the next thing we're going to do, you know, we're going to use our CD image, and because we already uploaded it, we can do here. Our type is Linux. You can see you can also do Windows. Something that is still actually quite popular. It was, and you still see it around. It was made by Sun Microsystems, who originally developed Java, who have now become Oracle. Is Solaris, which is a Unix-based operating system. But in this case, we're just going to go here, and we're going to go to the 6.x to 2.6 kernel. That works perfectly fine for us. So next, graphics card, we're just going to go default. A virtual SCSI controller, that works perfectly fine for this situation. Machine default, yeah, that's fine. BIOS, that works perfectly fine for us. We don't need the unified extensible firmware interface for this particular setup.
For the most part, you're going to end up just leaving this all as default.
Yeah.
There's very few cases where you're going to change any of these.
Like, the one case I've ever had to actually change it was with Home Assistant when I virtualized it, because Home Assistant specifically requires on their setup a UEFI BIOS. Disk, this is just your virtual disk. It's going to take up storage on your drive and sit here and make a disk that's going to act as the hard drive of the system. In this case, our storage is going to be local VM because that is the only drive that I have on here. 32 gigs is actually more than enough. Cache, I always do write through because it writes through completely through to the disk. It doesn't keep things stored in a buffer because that way, if it writes through, it's written to disk. If you have no caching or anything, or you turn on caching where it stores it in some sort of buffer, if you lose power and that stuff is still in RAM, it's gone. Now, another cool thing, if you ever need to know, what does something do, Proxmox actually has a nice little help that'll bring you to a help page right on that particular topic you're on. So, you can see, hey, what does IO thread do and all of that? Image format, cache mode, what do all these things do? Trim/discard. That's sitting here. It can do thin provisioning where it can expand the drive as it needs, but it'll go up to the maximum that you set. Let's see. Yeah, Mad Owl Oracle did kill Sun and Solaris. NC solid state prices are starting to come down. Well, let me rephrase that. They were starting to come down. But in this case, I could do an SSD emulation because I do have an SSD in here, but I'm just going to leave these things as their default. 32 gigs, more than enough for our VM, especially when I only have a 250 gig drive in here. Now, right here, this is where you can sit here and tell it, hey, how many CPUs are you giving this machine? Your CPU, so this one, you could virtualize a machine. You could tell this machine that, hey, it was actually a server with, an 8-socket system, and each socket, the processor had 2 cores and everything like that. You could go out and do that and make some crazy machines. In this case, socket 1, core 1, all I need. The CPU affinity, that is where you can actually sit here and dedicate a core. You can say, hey, the core that you're getting is core 1. And so that is the core that it will use.
And just keep in mind, like a lot of things within computers, it starts at 0.
Yeah.
So it'll be 0 through 7, not 1 through 8 or 4 or whatever.
Now, something I've learned throughout my years, running Proxmox, is this right here. You can virtualize other styles of processors. But if, for instance, you virtualize a processor that your processor doesn't have the capability of,
like ARM,
it can sit here and slow down the virtual machine, but it can also cause stability errors. The best thing to do is actually just take your default and set it to host. This is the most stable way to have the virtual machines on this, because all it does is it says, hey, main computer, what processor do you have? That's the kind of processor, like the architecture, that I'm going to pass on to this virtual machine. So that way, that any commands that are given by the virtual machine are something that the host computer can run. So, NetVentive, believe it or not, you actually can virtualize TrueNAS within Proxmox. The big thing with that is you need a host bus card that all your drives are connected to, and you need to pass through that entire card. So any drives that you're using in Proxmox, you would not be able to use in TrueNAS and vice versa. For something like that, I would recommend separate machines for those. And believe it or not, TrueNAS nowadays also can run virtual machines. It is another option to do. I just tend to prefer Proxmox for my virtualization, but I did try the TrueNAS route for a bit and just running all of my stuff off of a TrueNAS box, because I've got in my home server, I've got like 4 different servers running, from, you know, a standalone bare metal Jellyfin server, a TrueNAS server, a Proxmox server with multiple hosts on that, and then I have one server that I just call my let's see what happens server, and that's my server that I'll just do something stupid on just to find out what's going to happen.
I actually run both at home for myself. I have TrueNAS, you know, being the actual storage device within the network. It also runs most of my standard services like Bitwarden or I'm thinking what I run. Nextcloud or stuff like that.
Yep.
And all of those run on Docker containers. But I also do have a Proxmox server, which I use for my gaming servers, like Minecraft or Rust or stuff like that. And the only reason I do it that way is because I do really like the way that TrueNAS handles storage for stuff like my Plex and stuff like that. But Proxmox tends to be a little bit easier to run stuff like game servers, just because it's easier to, you know, create those VMs, and when you're running game servers, it's a lot easier to run it as a VM than as a Docker, for multiple overhead reasons and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's pretty much the difference between a purpose-built device like Proxmox for virtual machines and a machine that had virtual machines added on because it had the capability. But then our next one is, how much memory are we going to allocate? Now, you're going to get into a bit of computer history and everything in binary, so bear with me, because I know a lot of you guys probably already know this, but there are some people that may not. So I'm pretty sure that we've all bought like a USB thumb drive or something that says, hey, this drive is 256 gigabytes. But then when you plug it into the computer, it says it's like only 250. Well, that's because an actual gigabyte is a metric. It's a metric measurement. It's a power of 10. Computers don't think that way. They think in powers of 2. So I can't remember what year they did it. If James wants to look it up and tell us, he can, but they came out with a different system for computers to differentiate those numbers. So you have the gigabyte, which is the some 10 to the power of whatever, and then you have the GB byte, GIBI byte, which is the base 2 system. Now, in this case, this memory, you can see how it's saying MIB. That is a MIBI byte. It is the base 2 equivalent of a megabyte. This computer has 12 megabytes of memory in it, but that actually shows up as 11.9 MIBI byte. So you lose a bit because 1 MIBI byte is actually 1024 bytes or kilobytes, and then 1 kilobyte is 1024 bytes. 1 byte is 8 bits. But like the hard drive manufacturers and everything treat 1 kilobyte as 1,000 bytes, not 1024. So every kilobyte you lose some. Again, 1 megabyte is, they view it as 1000 kilobytes, not 1024. So Proxmox actually does it in MB. So if you put, 2000 MB, or 2 gigabytes, you will get 2 gigabytes. But 2048 is an actual full what we grew up, what the computer thinks we call a gigabyte. So this is just 2 gigs of memory. That should be more than enough for us. Now, in this case, I only have one Ethernet port plugged in here. So Proxmox by default creates a bridge to make it so that, hey, this port has a bridge so we can connect outside. I'm just going to use that default bridge. What I can show you later, if you want, how to create your own bridge that way. Like, for instance, I actually have 3 Ethernet ports on this computer. So if I wanted to, I could have this main port be just for communication to the host system, and then I could have another Ethernet port for the virtual machines. Or if you really wanted to, you could get like a 4 Ethernet port NIC, and each one of those ports could be dedicated to a virtual machine, so that way you weren't sharing bandwidth across any of those. But in this case, I'm just doing this. I'm going to turn off the firewall because this is an internal system. I know it's not going out on the internet or anything like that, so I'm not going to have to really worry about that. And this system is completely separate from anything else, and I don't have anything critical on any of these systems in the studio. If I wanted to, I could separate with VLANs if I was running a managed switch and say, hey, I had a network for, the printers. I had a network for, I could have my own separate virtual networks, one for FDM printers, one for, resin printers, one for the studio equipment. And this is where I could notate that, because just like virtual machines, you can create virtual networks. But in this case, we're just going to keep the VM BR0. We're going to go next, and then it's going to say, have you confirm, hey, these are the settings. Is this good? If something doesn't look right, you can go back and select which one you want. Otherwise, you can hit finish, or in this case, I know that I just want to get into installing Ubuntu right after this. So I'm going to tell it to start after it creates this image. But let me check on chat here real quick. Hey Armor, how you doing? Welcome on in. Yeah, Linux is fun. There's no death on there. Linux is fun. Yep. So NC, if you aren't using the onboard SATA controller, like you have a PCIe SSD or something like that, you could pass through the native SATA controller and just pass all those through. Yep. That Ventive, I remember the days where I was looking at 64K and be like, oh my god, I have so much. All right, so we're going to hit finish, and what that's going to do is it's going to start. You can see right up here, it's making our VM. Its status is unknown. That's why we have a little question mark up here. But I can go ahead and click on that, and if I go to the console, it'll connect, and you can see right here, I can actually interact with this from Proxmox and do what I need to on it. Now, this is the experiment we're doing on this computer because, like I said, the processors in this computer are from 2009. So that's what? A 17-year-old processor at this point? So these aren't the most up-to-date things. But you can see even this old, outdated thing, we can go to the summary. You can see I'm kind of pegging what this CPU can do. But again, I've gone kind of to the extreme to kind of show.
That's what she said, by the way.
To show, you know, the kind of things you can do with old hardware, especially with the way RAM prices are right now, leading to Raspberry Pis getting more expensive. You know, it might be an alternative to if you self-source your printer. You know, get that, you know, 7-year-old laptop that's sitting in the corner collecting dust. That can run your Klipper. You know, that old desktop that, you know, is sitting around and you just bought a new one because it was running a 7th gen processor and it couldn't upgrade to Windows 11. You can turn into a virtual machine host and run multiple Klipper machines off of it. Bergman 16. I don't know how you survive with 16K. Okay, see, one day they'll determine. But right now, as long as these things are 64-bit, which they are, we'll still be good. So, for those of you that have not installed Linux without, you know, either like the Raspberry Pi way where you just load the entire image onto the SD card and it just goes, or, you know, your standard live ISO for Ubuntu or Fedora, this is actually a lot of times what you'll see is just a console-like screen. And so we're going to go through, you know, our language is English, and then done. In this case, what I'm going to do is instead of installing Ubuntu server, I'm going to make this thing as lightweight as possible and tell it to install Ubuntu server minimize. So what it's going to do is it's going to take and put the pretty much the bare minimum on here that you need to run this server. So nothing extra. You know, I'm not, a lot of times people do get in trouble with this because, you know, hey, they'll need to edit a file and something, and they won't have a console text editor to edit the file, so that they have to go through and install that. But in this case, you know, I want this thing to be as small and as lightweight as possible. You know, well, not necessarily as lightweight, because there are lighter weight operating systems besides Ubuntu, but since we're running the server, it doesn't have to run a graphical interface or anything. Everything on this thing is going to be text-based. You know, search for third-party drivers, I'm not going to really need it on this thing. This thing is old enough that if the drivers aren't in Linux kernel, there's a bigger problem. So we're going to go done. You know, hey, it gives me the IP address that it's going to be doing for the computer. We'll go done. We don't have a proxy address. So what it's going to do right now is it's going to test and make sure that, hey, do I have an actual connection out to the internet so that it can download updates? That's what that mirror location being tested is doing. It's saying, can I reach the repositories in order to download updates? In this case, yes, it could. We're going to go done. And I'm just going to tell it, hey, this is a virtual machine. Use the entire disk. You know, because it's already used up in the system anyway. I'm going to give you full access to it. I'm going to go done. And then that all looks good. Now, and then we're going to go done. And it's saying, hey, selecting this, it will start the install process. Anything I had on that virtual disk is going to be gone. Well, this was a blank virtual disk, so yeah, cool, continue. Now, with this name, you know, This is the login name and everything for the computer. So we're just going to call this Penguin Makers. Server name. Oh, we're just going to call it. Server name is going to be Ubuntu because, you know, we're setting it up as if we're setting it up for the host for that one. Username. And I'm just going to set up a BS password on here because I'm probably going to be changing these out anyway. So, you know, this is asking if you want to use Ubuntu Pro. I'm not a business. I'm not going to pay for Ubuntu Pro. I am going to install OpenSSH if I wanted to, and I already had SSH keys. This is where I could import them. I'm not going to do that. So done. Now, you can also do things like install, like they have some pre-configured packages. Like if you were going to be running Nextcloud on this, you could sit here and install that already. Instead of having to go through that. LXD, that is Ubuntu's container manager. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do. You know, the micro KS for Kubernetes. But in this case, I don't need any of that, so we're not going to select any of it. And we're going to go done. And then it shows me what the process is. And this is the point of the virtual machine setup, especially on an older system, where you get to do the favorite pastime of IT people everywhere. Hurry up and wait. James, have you found that thing that you needed me to print? Give me a second here. So while we're waiting for that, what I'm going to do is clean off my build plate here, because I do have a piece on this that continues over from last stream. Which is the holder for the CNC kitchen solder heatset bits. Now, those that haven't been with me, I now have both a smooth plate and a textured plate for the Prusa. I don't know if this is just me or if it's just something with Prusa, but I have needed glue stick for it to hold the prints down. But what I did with this, last time when I printed this piece, I printed it with this base on the build plate and the inserts facing up, and I had a bit of trouble with the dimensions. So what I did this time that also helped clear up the text is I went and flipped it upside down, printed it with the face on the build plate, and I'm going to see how that is going to do with holding our pieces in. And I just lost my mic. Okay, so while we're waiting for the OS to install here, let's see I know the M4 last time was one of mine that did not want to go in. So let me find the M4. Okay. It goes in, but it's still a very tight fit.
That's what she said.
M8, no problem. M5, no problem. Let's see here. Down Under, I did not get in on the first round of Index. Believe it or not, I do actually have the discount codes for it because I did buy the Prusa, but I did not sit here and get in on the first rounds. Because I don't have if I'm going to do it, I'd want to do the 8 tool head, and I don't have $1,000 sitting around right now to buy the kit for the Core 1 Plus. Okay, so what I can say is the holes for the M4 and the M5 are the only ones that I'm actually having issues with. And normally I'd be like, hey, maybe it was a printing orientation thing, but they were on opposite sides of the print. So I think this may actually be a model issue. Because yeah, it's just the M4 and the M5. Everything else, no problem on this insert. So I'm gonna see if I can sit here and go through. Down Under, the email I got sent did say that it's good until December. Second here. It's going to go to printables because James has something he wants me to print.
Obviously, don't put the knot.
Oh, the plug? I think you need those. All right, we're going to download all of these. So James is having me print out little ducks. And let me copy this and bring it over here for you guys. So there are apparently 22 different ducks in this one. Now, the big question is, we'll do it in the black. Actually, they are ducks. I could print them in yellow. Chat, what do you guys think? Does James deserve yellow ducks? So yeah, Jeff, I'm pretty sure you cannot run. Well, you can run Octoprint, and I believe there's a way to run Klipper within Octoprint, whether it's Clipperized Octo or something like that. Now, with Mad Dog, with what I'm showing you with the virtual machines, you could actually have one virtual machine that was running Klipper and another one that was running Octoprint, controlling separate printers, and both of those running on this one machine. All right, so the installation is complete. So we're going to go reboot now. Yep, so you could actually, Mad Dog, that is something you could do. You could run one virtual machine with Klipper, and you could run two other virtual machines, and each one of those running Octoprint within them. And that way, they'd all be running on one machine. You'd have USB cords going out to them and everything. But that is something you could do. All right, we're gonna let this refresh, but yeah, chat, what do you guys think? Does James deserve yellow ducks, or should he get black? Pull. So I am going to put the three colors that I have sitting around right now. Welcome in, Tom, by the way. Don't know when you snuck in here. Digital Dragon, how you doing? All right, so blue like the toilet duck. Let's see how the polls go. We got 6 votes in already. All right, we are in. So what I'm going to do is just see what our IP address of this is. 10.2.85.5. Okay. So if I wanted to at this point, I could start up a shell and I could SSH into this machine. I actually, when I'm working on a virtual machine, I actually prefer doing that versus the console, because then you can actually, if you need to, you can copy and paste there. It gets a bit more difficult. Copying and pasting through the Proxmox shell. So let's open up a terminal here. And I still can't type. Okay. So let me zoom in so you guys can see here. So, just like with anything, whenever you install James is messing with some stuff here. Whenever you install a new version of, you know, Linux, it's not up to date. Even when you do it through the, through the Raspberry Pi imager or the Lerna etcher and put it on the SD card. Once you get it up and running, first thing you're going to want to do is check for update. So we're going to go sudo apt update. That's the great thing about Ubuntu. For those of you that are used to like Debian through the Raspbian, same commands because they're both based on the Debian kernel. So it's saying all packages are up to date, so cool. We don't have to worry about that. So what I need to do now is get Kiao. And the first thing we're going to do is we have to install Git. Now I know that I want to do this, so I'm just going to add the tac y at the end, which just says, hey, I'm running this as a super user, so sudo super user do. So it's running with elevated privileges, install Git, and just automatically do it. Don't ask me if I want to do it. If it's not on there, just install it. Okay, so we've got that. Now we're going to clone the Kiao GitHub. Now, something that a lot of people don't know, when you want to copy and paste in Linux in the terminal, it's not just Control-C or Control-V. It's Control-Shift-C for copy, Control-Shift-V for paste. So what this command is saying is, change our directory to the home directory and then clone the GitHub of Kiao. Let's see here. I could say I'm not familiar with him down under, but if anybody in chat does know who down under is talking about, and you are acquaintances with them, if someone's having a bad day, yeah, do like he says, reach out. Reaching out can mean the world to people at times, so I am all for that. Bergman, are we going to bring out the duck jokes? Because that's pretty ducked up. Okay, so we've got Kiao installed. So next, we're going to go to Kiao and we're going to run Kiao. Now, I have never run this without having some sort of MCU or something connected to it. Makermind Nexus. Life is like a hurricane. All right, so let's see how Kiao runs on this. So let's go. You know, hey, it's telling us Klipper's not installed, Moonraker's not installed. So let's go and install. Let's do Klipper first. And this is saying how many instances. In this case, we just want to do one. And yeah, we'll let it create a sample printer config. So this is where you can sit here and have it install multiple instances of Klipper on this one VM. The problem with that is and that can control multiple computers. But if this VM were to go down, every single printer that was on this VM would go down, whereas separating them into each individual machines, if one goes down, the rest are still working. This is why, you know, there are plenty of people out there that show how to install Klipper onto an old laptop and stuff like that. I wanted to show you guys how to do it through the virtual machines. That way, you know, you're still vulnerable to, if this one machine goes down, all of the printers are down. But if you had a problem with one operating system, it's not going to take out all of your printers at once. You're still susceptible to hardware just like you would be on the printers themselves. Right, we're just letting it set up all of its stuff. And as you can see, even though this computer is ancient in the computing world, it's still running this fairly decently. That's one of the big powers of Linux, is it does not add a bunch of bloat and stuff. So you can run it on old hardware and it be perfectly fine. All right, it looks like James, did you end the poll? Looks like you're getting orange ducks. So let me sit here and see. File, import, a zip archive. And then you said you do not need the plug, correct? Okay. So let's arrange those on the plate. Okay, so Klipper installed, so now we're going to do Moonraker. Oh, wait. Let's go back. Klipper incomplete. Let's try installing Moonraker. Klipper not installed. Moonraker cannot be installed. Klipper installed. Okay. Yep. Let's go back and quit. And actually, no, let's try it again. Let it do its thing again. So install Klipper 1, yes. Yes, it can override it. Ducks are about that big. You want smaller? Can you see? Let's see here. I'm just going to slice it here. Set a pipe. Yes, we're going to have it recreate. Okay. So it's giving me an error with Python. Go back up to the top of this. Okay. License classifiers are depreciated. All right, so let's go through. Okay, building wheel for Greenland. So we're just reading through the error log here and seeing what's going wrong. Nothing. Go there. Where was the actual error? Yeah, we're going to shrink down those ducts. I don't think you want to be here for 11 hours. Where is the actual error in this thing? Let's try manually installing Python. Okay, Python 3. Python 3. Okay, Python 3 is already in the newest version. Okay. Well, let me look up this error here real quick. Gonna look up the errors during Klipper. It's typically caused by outdated dependency versions in the Klipper repository or system level. Okay, so yeah, Klipper install error installing Python requirements. Okay, so they're saying that sometimes that it's caused by the version. So we might have to go with, we might have to reinstall this because it might not like Ubuntu. Let's see here. Oh, let me look in chat here. Hey, Cody Drakars. Yeah, my Gergman, it's also might be the Python libraries. I'm gonna go pip list outdated. Okay, what? Yep, so we're gonna install pip. Okay. Pip. Yeah. So this is one of the downsides to the minimized version. List. Outdated. Well, I definitely think there's some outdated packages on here. Okay. So I do have a command that's just going to go through and update all this for us. And, oh, it won't let me do it that way. Okay. Ugh. Okay, so one thing is I'm not seeing even the virtual environment is outdated. Been a while since I've done a Python update. That hasn't just been through sudo. Let me just make sure that everything is in fact, all packages are up to date. Wish it would tell me in Kiao what package it was that failed. So Cody, I run them separately because the update just looks to see if there's anything to update, and then the upgrade actually does the update. So if there's nothing to update, upgrade is going to come back with nothing to upgrade. All right, we are in tinker mode, so I need to grab another Mountain Dew. Time is at 9. We've been going for 2 hours. We switched over to Baja Blast. We've gone from voltage to Baja. We're going to go to 50%, make them tiny ducks. All right. Sorry about this, guys. I'm just slicing up a new plate here real quick to print out James's ducks. That's a bit more reasonable. Okay, bear with me real quick.
No, not bears, ducks.
We're just changing out.
It's called multitasking.
Filament.
Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's not.
I mean, it's also called ADHD. Loading in our new filament here. Get him the nice orange filament. Continue, and it's going to do its purge here in a second. Go from the black to the orange. But while we're waiting on that, let me see if anybody else is having anything on what they did. Nothing there. All right, it is purging us now. Just waiting on the filament to load. Let that heat load up and heat soak for a bit. Pull up chat. Let's see here, just catching up. Let's see here. So Cody, it's actually running the most up-to-date version of Python, but I'm seeing here some people are reporting that there is in the Klipper requirements text file, the Python can is set to 3.3.4 and updating it to 4.3, people are having some success. So let's see here. Let's go into Kiao. And I'm going to install Nano because I did the minimal install, so I know that's not installed. And let's check the requirements. Definitely not there. Yo.config. Okay, so let's go to the Klipper. Okay, that's the Klipper configs. I'm not seeing where this requirements.txt file is. Okay, it's under the Klipper, so under scripts. And there's the there's the Clippy requirements. And what people are saying is the Python can, instead of 3.3.4, change it to approximately equal to 4.3. Okay. We're just going to go through and run our Kiao again. And install Klipper 1. Yes. No, we're not going to overwrite it. Yes, we're going to let it. Actually, no, we're going to let it keep the there. That's a new one. Yes. Okay. Let's go back. And Klipper's installed. So yeah. Apparently just the GitHub for Klipper has the wrong Python can in it. So if you run into that, it's under Klipper scripts. And it's called clippy-requirements.txt, and you need to change Python can equals 3.3.4 to Python can tilde equals 4.3. So now let's install Moonraker. All right, we're pretty good and soaked there. So let me start the print here. Print, upload and print. Yeah, it's actually funny because yeah, like I think I was reading where someone was asking if you could set up a slicer instance in a virtual machine. You absolutely could. Yeah, you're probably gonna have. Hey James, can you mute me real quick? Okay. And let's just go ahead and install mainsail. But the issue you would have is, you know, running it on like a dedicated computer that will have a better, you'll have a better time of it, because that is a bit more powerful than limiting the resources it has. Plus, if you have a dedicated graphics card in that system, that can help with your slicing and everything. So let's install the client configs for mainsail. So actually, no, we don't need to do that. Let's go back and quit. And we're going to use the IPA command. IPA, for those of you that don't know.
It's more than just a drink.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not India Pale Ale. In Linux, we used to use ifconfig for seeing things about different networking interfaces. That has been depreciated. It still works because Linux is all about keeping that continuity and not breaking things. But the newer command is IP, and IPA is just IP space A is just a shortcut for IP space dash all. How you doing, Wix Central? Tonight we just set up a Proxmox environment on this computer, and we've set up a virtual machine on it running Ubuntu server, and Klipper is installed in that server now. So we have our IP address, and so what we're going to do is copy that and come over here to our web interface and paste that in. Okay, Moonraker can't connect, so what we're probably going to need to do is just reboot our virtual machine here. That's going to kill our connection here. But we can go back to our Proxmox instance and see when it boots back up. Well, Wix, you're getting to see, and it's actually, besides some troubles with the way that Kiao installed Klipper, because apparently the Kiao GitHub sat here and puts in the wrong Python can variable. It's been going good, so. Now this is saying mains. I'm going to refresh. So please check the Klipper service is running. And if you ever need to clear your screen, a little Linux shortcut, Control L will clear your screen. Oh God, I'm brain farting. Yep. So Klipper is running. So why is mainsail not talking to it? Hey, yeah. It's loaded. Yeah, it's failing to run. Mad Dog, this is actually not even hooked up to a printer right now. I'm just trying to get the... Yeah.
Try to start it too, then.
Yeah. Nope, that's code exited. So why have you exited? So Mad Dog, I don't even have this box hooked up to a printer right now. I was just pulling up the web interface to even get it to see. Actually, if we go to machine, so actually, yeah, that is, yeah, repo is dirty. So down under, it actually pulls up the web interface and everything. But when I go to the dashboard, this is all I get. Let's go to the Moonraker config. Okay. Now this is where down under, I'm going to actually, the Linux side of things, I'm cool with. I am still learning Klipper, and down under, please correct me if I'm wrong, but under the Moonraker config, the host should be 127.0.0.1 for the local host. So down under, this actually isn't connecting to any machine right now. I'm just trying to make sure that that it comes up, period. So this would be like, having an MCU, it's the equivalent of having a machine hooked up to an MCU that's not flashed at all. But I don't have it hooked up to anything. It is port 7125. I'm going to try changing the host to localhost. So Moonraker reports disconnected. So mainsail is connected to Moonraker, but Moonraker is not connected to Klipper on this. I do not believe the firewall is even enabled. Yep. Yeah, UFW is not even on here. Okay, so
Just out of curiosity, back to the
Okay. Inactive. Hmm. Let's see here. Yeah, so down under, we don't even have a firewall installed on this system, so it allows remote IPs. Yeah, and that's what we just did down under. We stopped it and restarted it. So Matt, I'll know it hasn't been running because that's what this result exit code is. Its status is failure. Yep. How you doing, bearded printer? Oh. No, it does not. That is Klipper. It's Klipper.service.
Fine. It's so see what it's
Let's see here. Bearded printer, we are not running RM TAC RF / especially with sudo. Yeah. It should be TAC U or Klipper. There we go. Wrong options. Okay. So it's this file, line 8. So line 8 and line 7. Yeah. And that. Yep. So let's go back to Kiao and try it the easy way and yep.
Yeah, I try to tell him to do these things, and he never listens to me.
No, that just installed a second Klipper. Yep, let's remove Klipper. Two. Okay, so Klipper's not installed, so let's go back and install Klipper. Yes, yes. Let's see if this errors out again because it downloads the bad Clippy requirements. Yeah, Matt, there might be a greenlit version in the requirements.txt that we need to update since we had to update the other one. We'll see how it goes. This is one of the things I like doing, you know. We sit here and tinker with the printers. This is me tinkering with the system. So there's where it's actually... Okay, that's where the greenlit sat here and started doing. So let's quit that. And we're going to go... Okay, so this is that Python can. And this is the one that needs to be 4.3. So it should be trying to, so before, so either way, it should have been trying to install Greenlit 3.1.1. Okay. Let's go back into Kiao, install. Actually, let's go back, incomplete. Install Klipper. Yes, yes. No, do not overwrite it. Yes, recreate the virtual environment.
See if it comes.
Bring the markers. less than don't match. Yeah, for some reason, yeah. Ignoring greenlit markers. Oh, that's because it's greenlit 3.1.1. Failed to build greenlit. So I believe, Cody, that we are actually on Python 3. Uh-oh. We have a visitor.
The most important of visitors.
The visitor actually decided to come today. I know if I put her on the desk, she's just going to jump down and be like, nope, I'm out of here. But she is the most tolerant cat I have ever seen. She'll just sit here until I let her go. We have a miracle. She has stayed on the desk for a few seconds. Okay. Okay. We are on, so Cody, to answer your question, we are on 3.14.4 for the Python version. Yep. Now that was River. Oh, now River is bugging James. Tom, we've done the Python can 4.3. Upgrade setup tools. So setup tools is actually newer. Oh no, so if you look up here, Mad Dog, what this is saying is if the Python version is greater than or equal to 3.12, we're 3.14, so it's greater than, install Greenlit 3.1.1. Yeah, I might try installing Greenlit manually. Let's try installing Greenlit manually. Ah, crud, it's doing this thing. Three point 3.2.
Progress.
All right. No, we don't want to overwrite that. Yes, we want to override the virtual environment. Yeah, we need to change. Just gonna scroll up here and see which version of Greenlit it installed. 3.3.2. We're gonna. Yep, it barfed on Greenlit again, and I think Yeah, I'm gonna go back into the script and tell it use this version. Okay. Let's see if this does it. That looks like it's doing something. That, Tom, yeah, the third option is to rebuild the environment.
Hey guys, we're hackers. We've done it.
Klipper's installed, main sails, Moonrake is installed, main sails installed. Let's refresh this. That did it. So, for those of you that want to do this, know that the default Klipper, the default files that you get from that Keown downloads from the Klipper GitHub are outdated compared to what's out there. So you have to go through and change those two variables. I'm pretty sure if we didn't install Greenlit manually and we just updated that file to say, hey, use this version of Greenlit, it would have installed. But you know, you need to change that that Python can setting, and then change the Greenlit version. But you know, I'm expecting this error because hey, there's no MCU for it to connect to. But that is working. So, and you can see now that we have that, if I wanted to, you know, I could create another VM and do this all over again. I could also just create a default VM and make a template of it and just copy that over and over and over again. So now that I have this one set up, I could make a template of it that's already set up, launch a new VM with that template, and it just makes it. Now I have a whole nother one set up. Yeah, you can see you can convert it to a template, and then if I were to use this template to make a new VM, it would just come already set up with all this stuff already done. So, you know, if I had 6 printers that I wanted to get this done on, I could then use that template to make 6 virtual machines already set up the way we needed it to, and then we're done. The other cool thing, like I said, you have snapshots, so you can sit here and say, you know, take a snapshot. So if something were to go wrong with this instance, you could have a snapshot that you could say, hey, reload this VM from this snapshot, and it'll kind of roll it back to a previous version so you can get up and running. So if you sat here and, you know, hit the dreaded update button in Klipper and all of a sudden everything broke, you could roll it back to the point before you hit the update button. So LTX, yes, this could replace having a Pi on each printer by running a virtual machine for each printer within this. So you have one machine that controls multiple printers. What I would probably recommend doing is, you know, if you wanted to go this route, you know, this could be a stopgap, or, you know, for those that can't get their hands on a Pi, and then I would still install the Pi initially, get everything set up that way, then set up the virtual machine, unplug the Pi, and then plug this in its place. That way, if something were to happen, you know, I live in Florida. We're the lightning capital of the world. Lightning were to strike and fry this computer. You know, if I still had the Pis in there, I could then go and just swap out the Pi. Boom, it's done. So Mad Owl, a lot of the Pis, you use a USB cord to go from the Pi to the MCU. In this case, what you would do is you would go take a USB cord and go from this machine to the MCU. And what you would have to do is, if you were to go here into hardware, you can add a USB device. Now in this case, I don't have a USB device plugged into here, but you could sit here and tell it, you know, hey, pass through a single port. So like, for instance, you know, I have the Logitech thing. I could pass the Logitech keyboard of this onto that virtual machine. So if you had your printer plugged in, it would show up in this, and you could sit here and say, hey, you know, pass this USB port into the virtual machine. And so that USB port is then dedicated to that virtual machine. It's not being used by the host anymore. And that's how you would do it. You would bypass the Pi by plugging USB directly into the MCU. So it wouldn't eliminate your cable nightmare, but you'd have one place to do everything. Mad Dog, theoretically, you can kind of run it over Ethernet. And the reason I say kind of is they do make adapters for like very long USB runs that will convert a USB signal to an Ethernet signal, run it over an Ethernet cable, and then on the other end convert it back to USB. Because one of the problems with the USB cable is it does have a limited distance as to how far it can run. Those USB to Ethernet adapters do kind of eliminate that, but then you're adding extra hardware. It would be simpler to say, you know, for instance, on the setup I have back here, you know, keep a computer right down here below the printers, and then just run a USB cable up to the individual printers. So yeah, so for a lot of things, like for instance, on the Voron, the Leviathan board talks to the Pi via USB. But then out of the Leviathan, I can go CAN. But what that would do is, you know, one of the things that it does is, you know, like Down Undermaker, he hates running the 5 volt, and he's got very good reason, running the Pi off of the GPIO pins, because you're not getting enough amperage and everything and voltage that way. Well, this would eliminate that problem. So for these printers that aren't coming with 5 volt power supplies nowadays, you know, you wouldn't have to worry about that 5 volt because you're not running a Pi that needs that 5 volt. But yeah, this right here would replace the Pi entirely, because the Pi just connects to the MCU via USB. And so you would just connect this to the MCU via USB.
I think that about wraps it up for today.
Yeah. I think we're pretty good here. We might do some more Linux stuff next stream, because I want to get back to the Voron, but I've got plans for it, but I need to get parts ordered in to get those plans done. So I'm still waiting on that. I mean, if you guys want, I've got an older computer over here. Well, older. I've got the computer that used to be in the old studio. It was the machine that I sit here and show you guys when I'm bringing up, you know, websites and manuals and stuff like that. I have upgraded that computer, and so I have that one sitting around. If you'd like, I can show you guys the entire process of installing, you know, Linux on a computer, kind of like what we did here, but then what it looks like going through upgrading and everything, things to look out for, and even things like what a lot of people don't realize is the desktop environment, you know, GNOME, XFCE, KDE, Cosmic, Cinnamon, Mate, while you can get prepackaged Linux distributions with that environment already installed. Just because you say downloaded the standard Ubuntu doesn't mean you're locked into a certain Linux desktop environment. You can switch and change them to your heart's content. So, what do you guys think? Would you like to see some more of this Linux content and everything? While we're waiting on parts for the Voron?
I vote we do Arch.
We can do that. I'll need your help with that one because I am not good at Pac-Man.
See.
DNF, apt, I'm fine with. Yeah. So yeah. And the cool thing about like be showing you guys this Linux, if you've got like old laptops or something sitting around, SUSE Linux, we could. It's been forever since I've done SUSE, just because, you know, I sit here and typically run Fedora. Oh God. Yeah, I'd have to look up their package manager. But, you know, so, and like this is one of this was the Penguin part of Penguin Makers, you know, the Linux side. And I can tell you it's something that, you know, even if you don't use it, you know, I'm pretty sure a lot of you have kids and stuff like that. Well, you know, hey, get them on, you know, kids are terrible with, you know, breaking hardware. Well, hey, the kid wants a machine that they can sit here and browse the internet on. Linux does that great. You can sit here and give them that like 7-year-old computer, throw Linux on it, and it'll fly doing that. Watching YouTube, all of that. I mean, you just saw here, this little thing right here was as old as it is, was running through all those processes for doing the updates and all that with no problem. So Tom, you, with that comment, I think you hate me. Go back to Slackware. Oh. Oh, yeah. Linux from scratch is definitely a thing that can be done.
We'll start by compiling the kernel.
Yeah. We'll compile the kernel. We'll put our own package manager in it. Yeah. That is, when they say with Linux, you can do what you want, they are not joking. You know, if you want to customize Linux so that way, you know, you have a cat themed Linux, like to where, you know, you launch up your terminal and you get an ASCII image of cats and everything as your initial image with a cat background where all of your icons are cat based and the sounds are, you know, different cat meows for errors and stuff like that. You can do that.
I don't know. I've kind of given up on Fedora at this point. The two biggest things that are the absolute most pain in the butt about Fedora is A, it doesn't install most of the codecs to be able to use a lot of the web browsing, you know, to watch video on a web browser. You have to figure out how to do that yourself. And it's an absolute right pain in the butt to get the right ones that work with Firefox. The other thing is it is almost impossible to install DaVinci Resolve on Fedora. Why? I don't know. It just doesn't work.
See, and this is the great Linux debate. I'm a Fedora person. The system that I'm running, that you guys are seeing everything being done on, is a Fedora-based system. Now, I will say, for new users to Linux, I typically do recommend Ubuntu. Not because of the great features or anything like that, but the support out there and the software written for it is just broader. So
See, here's the thing: is I've had all these issues with Fedora, and I don't hate it by any stretch, but Arch just works.
if you can't tell, he uses Arch.
By the way,
But yeah, so what we can do is next week I can get that other computer because I swapped out processors and stuff like that. I can get that computer up and running. We can do a from scratch Ubuntu desktop install. I'll show you guys how to change your desktop environment. Even things like going in and changing the name of the computer. And I can show you what the different desktop environments look like. And so, but I can tell you, there's someone that I've been helping that we got him on Ubuntu. Not because, it was necessarily the best, but because, for instance, with resin printers, the slicer that I like to use with resin printers is Lychee Slicer by MangoDB or Mango 3D or something like that. They have an app image that you can install in Fedora, but app images are kind of a standalone sandbox system. Well, for Ubuntu, they just have a package that you can install, so it just natively integrates with the system. Orca Slicer, for the longest time, they sat here and made a Debian image and an app image. They've recently updated to being a Debian image and a Flatpak, which works a lot better than an app image in my opinion. But that native Debian just on Ubuntu or a Debian based distro, you just install it like a lot of people are used to on Windows. So that's why for newer users, get your feet wet with Ubuntu, then move out from there and experiment.
honestly, Arch has some of the best documentation of any OS ever, which makes it so nice.
But yep, so
Again, the documentation. That's all I care about.
see, Tom, for once, I'm going to actually say, and this is because I think an executable might actually be better than an app image. Just because they work 100% of the time. As long as they are compatible with the Windows operating system you're running, they work. I have
So you're
had
telling me 90% of the time they work 100% of the time?
Yep. Whereas I have had so many instances where you download an app image and you go through and everything is set up properly. And, I've done that app image on Ubuntu. I've done it on Fedora. I've done it, on Pop OS. And no system you go onto will that app image work. Yeah. App image is, if anybody here starts running Linux on a regular basis and you have an option for an app image, avoid it like the plague.
The issue is, I think that app images are going to start becoming a bigger thing. The reason for that...
Flatpak and snap packages are where it's going. Snap packages for Ubuntu, Flatpak for Fedora.
Okay, I had those mixed up in my head. Yes. Yep, you're right.
Yep.
But what I was going to say, and yeah, it goes more toward a Flatpak now that I'm thinking about it, is because stuff like Azite, for example, which is one of the biggest Linux OSs right now for gaming that isn't pre-installed on a Steam Deck is specifically Fedora Silverfin or Silverblue, whatever it is.
Silverblue. Yep.
Which, if you don't know, is an immutable desktop or an immutable Linux, which means you can't actually change any of the files and have them, stay changed, for lack of a better term, just simplifying it down. So really the only way to install stuff is with a Flatpak.
Yep. Which the advantage of an immutable image is, contrary to popular belief, there are viruses for Mac and Linux. There's less of them out there, but they exist. If you have an immutable OS, even if it installs, once you restart the system, it's gone. But with that, we got the Proxmox up and going. We've figured out the idiosyncrasies of Klipper through Kiao, and I'm honestly kind of wondering if this is just a, hey, we're running it on x86, or if this is or we're running on Ubuntu and we wouldn't have had this problem with Debian. I'm wondering if this might be a problem with Kiao and Klipper and not just what we did here today. Might be something worth looking into. We could actually, because we can sit here and run a few different virtual machines on this, we could actually try a Debian install and see if we run into the same issues with Kiao and Klipper. We could do it on Fedora even. Yeah. So, all little things to take into account. If you guys want, I do have my Discord. The link is in the video description. If there's something that you guys want to see that's, Linux based, that I can, hop in my Discord and let me know. I can sit here and see. And, gives me little ideas. Oh, history is the best. NC kind of, where the user space is like limited to that user. It's almost like you have a resetting user base, so that way, like, even if this time you go on and you install something, whenever any user logs in, it just loads a default user space.
It's honestly Windows, but even less breakable than Windows. Because in Windows, it's very difficult to install or to remove something that will cause Windows to stop working. But it's possible. In immutable Linux, it is a lot more difficult to break the OS.
Tom, that might actually, I'd have to do some research on how to do it, but that actually might be something to do one time, installing, Klipper and Moonraker and Mainsail from scratch without using Kiao. It's something I could sit here and look into if you guys would be interested. But, hop in my Discord, let me know. We always welcome new people. If you guys, and then, I know there's some people that hate it, but I'm still working on growing this channel. If you guys are here and you haven't done so already, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help us get out here. NC came in here today just because we showed up on his feed because, we mentioned Linux this time. And so getting out to those new people really do help and help us grow and make it so that hopefully soon we can sit here and, take advantage of what YouTube gives to help support the projects and everything and get more of this stuff coming to you. Because right now I'm just doing stuff that, hey, I've got around here that I can sit here and show you guys. It's breaking in OS is an average weekend. Yeah. You know what? Hey, James. Should we break an OS? No, the virtual one.
You do you, boo.
Who want? Okay, so Bearded Printer said it earlier. Who wants to see what actually happens when you run RM TAC RF? Who wants to see what happens to Linux when you run this command?
Well, at this point, you can't not do it. You already have it typed.
I know we got quite a few people in here. Only 2 people want to see it? All right, let's go. You ready? We just need to type in my password. Ah. So they finally put in a failsafe for it.
Well, that's the end of stream,
Way,
everyone. Have a
way
good
to go.
time.
No, I got to give Ubuntu credit. They finally put in a failsafe. Yeah, give me a second here. James is taking care of that for you guys. But let's do it. You ready? Way to go to Ubuntu. They actually put a failsafe in again, partially against this. Look at how fast this is going by. This is on a system from 2009. But it did delete it up. I can't even reboot. Yep. So you can see it can't delete everything, but it deletes enough that you really can't do anything. So let's do this. You ready? We're going to go into our Proxmox here and tell it to reboot the server. So it's working on rebooting it. Let's see what it does. I think it's even deleted the reboot command. I don't think the computer knows how to reboot anymore. Oh. Oh, nope. So it just killed the SSH. So it's doing something. And we're gonna force stop it. Yep, so that's what it'll do. It'll stop it just enough. Oh, wow. The force stop. We're forcing it to restart. And now it won't even boot. No grub, nothing. So we're just going to remove that. And now that's gone.
Let's do it
Well,
again.
yeah. But with that, you know, I've been Penguin Makers. Behind the camera, sitting here with this commentary and changing things out for us has been James Cube. And go make something awesome.